The following is a pre-recorded interview with Steve Hackett, recorded November 11th, 2014 at 9 a.m. You're listening to WUSB Stony Brook, and it is my great pleasure to have a chat here with Mr. Steve Hackett, former guitarist with Genesis, and he's had an extensive solo career thereafter, ever since actually his first album was in 1975, and he's had a great solo career. He's probably my favorite Genesis alumnus since then. Has had, I guess it's about 27 solo albums. I don't know. I've been listening to you a lot recently, wow. And a lot of your albums. And
thank you very much.
I love your music.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad it works for you. It's funnily enough, I've just done a new album, which is due out for release at the end of March. So I'm at the point where I'm doing, once this forthcoming American tour is past, that'll be the end of me reviving the Genesis dream for people on a large scale. So I'm back to being myself, and the museum doors will be closed once again.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you've been doing this Genesis Revisited tour for, I think, I actually saw you do it. You came to Westbury, I think, last year.
Yeah,
and you're doing it again this weekend.
That's right, yeah. We'll be flying out of England tomorrow and be with you very shortly. Looking forward to it again.
It was actually one of the best concerts I've ever seen. It was it was amazing. It blew me away. I saw it with my good friend Pete. He's a bandmate of mine, actually, and I remember when you did the first time.
Yeah.
I think it was 1997 with John Wetton.
Oh,
you did the first Genesis Revisited, and I remember I picked up that album, and I was like, wow, this is great. It's like I'm so glad he's doing this, and and I missed you the first time around. I'm so glad you did it the second time.
Well, basically at that time we had John Wetton in the band, and Ian MacDonald, formerly of King Crimson and Foreigner, Chester Thompson. So we had an interesting band, and basically we did 4 concerts in Japan with that, plus Julian Kulbeck on keyboards, and that was a very interesting time. But it wasn't to go on the road forever. There was a set period for that, and we covered something of the past of each of the members, as much as we were able to in the short rehearsal time. So we did some of John's stuff, we did some King Crimson, we did some of my solo stuff, we did some Genesis stuff, and if we'd stayed together longer, we probably would have done something from Zappa and Weather Report with Chester, and who knows, But it was short. We did an album called Tokyo Tapes, which was recorded, I think, second show we'd ever played together in.
Great album.
Well, thank you. In Tokyo, and so it gives you an idea what was happening at that time.
Yeah, it was kind of like an all-star band, because it reminded me. It was like, because you had a lot of King Crimson. It was a great lineup. But this one was like very focused on Genesis from 1971 to 77.
Yes.
Great, fantastic band. I love the way you incorporated the saxophone into it. Like, it gave it a whole new dynamic to the sound, and it was fantastic sound. I can't wait to hear you guys again.
Well, thank you. I can't wait to do it again. I know the band are very enthusiastic, and this time we have Nick Beggs on bass, who has been working with John Paul Jones and Stephen Wilson and many others, and Nick brings a lot to it as well, as did Lee. Lee Pomeroy was wonderful on bass with this, and Lee is the other guy who works with just about everybody. He's recently been working with ELO, and he does everyone. He knows everyone's songs better than they do themselves. So that's extraordinary. Well, that's Lee, and that's wonderful. And then there's, as I say, there's this extraordinary thing. I've been spoiled for great bass players recently. So there's been Nick Beggs. I've also
Nick Beggs of Kaju.
Originally of Kajagoogoo, yes.
Kajagoogoo, yeah.
But he's a virtuoso player and extraordinary. And as well as being a pop star of the 80s, he's more often found playing virtuosic stuff. He's also a phenomenal stick player as well, playing unaccompanied pieces on stick.
Wow.
So he's very, very gifted.
You mentioned Steven Wilson. Like I saw some clips of him singing the Carpet Crawlers, and he sounds amazing singing that. He's like it was a really great performance of him singing that. It's funny how you bring back that there was like you've played with so many ex-members of Genesis. Like you played with Steven Wilson, you've played with Anthony Phillips, you've played with Peter Gabriel back in the 80s.
Sure.
I think it was for that one show.
Yep.
I wondered if you've ever considered doing an album of just ex-Genesis members, of having an ex-Genesis album.
It's entirely possible, but most of the time I tend to look towards the future, and so when I do this Genesis stuff live, I figure that the star of the show is the music, no matter who's playing it. So I go for the best players who take that music and keep it authentic, but we play with it in the way that Genesis would have done at one time. So we're not copying any one performance. So there are improvised moments, certainly for guitar, for me. I managed to change some things, and certain things are flexible, like the end of Supper's Ready is a flexible length and a flexible solo once I've done the set phrases that people recognize. Plus there's stuff on Fly on a Windshield from Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, so that's never the same every night. Other than 2 or 3 set phrases, most of that is completely improvised. So it's got an aspect of...
It might be my favorite song from Lamb Lies Down, Fly on a Windshield. That solo is just the way it hits, like right when the fly hits the windshield.
It's funny that, isn't it? Yeah, that's right. It's a moment of death in a way, but it's also a moment of great release. So it's got those twin aspects, and it's it has the several aspects. It's a little bit like a march, but at the same time the phrases are very romantic. But then you've got that aspect of something in the guitar that sounds a bit like a siren, and so I tend to keep that up and make it spooky as much as possible. It's a great feeling to be able to do that, and it also has an aspect of Middle Eastern music as well. So I try and do all of those things with it. I still enjoy playing it very much live.
Oh, I love it. I love that song. And have you considered I know I'm kind of going back a little bit, but I was just wondering have you considered working with Peter Gabriel at all? Because it seemed like you guys have some sort of chemistry. Like I never understood how the politics worked in Genesis.
Yeah.
That was a big question I had. But
yes. Well, I think there are some characters in Genesis who are more competitive than others. Now, Pete is not a competitive character. Neither is Phil. Neither am I. So it was relatively easy to work with any of those people in any combination. I think when I was working with Mike and Tony, it was more of the case of negotiating the harmony rather than everything falling organically into place. Nonetheless, of course, they were coming up with great ideas, so you had to fight your corner. and that was very different to the way I'd been working with other people before that, of course, in a semi-pro setup. So it was an eye-opener, really. But that's a long time ago, all of that.
Right. Yeah.
And hugely positive, but of course, some people are easier to work with than others. So, Pete and I always did share an affinity. We always loved the idea of experimentation. And I think similarly with Phil. Phil was always up for trying something new. And you had that kind of almost like a tug of war between those who wanted to control it and those who wanted to enlarge it and upset the apple cart in a constructive way. And somehow, we had that sort of managed to hold a truce that lasted for so many years and come up with great stuff.
Yeah, you had so many great writers in that band. Like, it just seemed like it could only last for so long. Like, I kind of see that in my band, because we have 5 writers in our band, and we're constantly competing for how much time, the limited amount of time that we have, to just work together. And it is difficult. But I could only imagine, like, what you guys, immensely talented, like. But you and Phil, like, I'm just listening to a song like "Blood on the Rooftops" that you and Phil wrote together. Like, it's just, I would love to hear, like, what you guys could come up with now. I know it's been so many years since then. Like, you guys are different people now. It's just be interesting to hear, what you guys, especially after listening to Archive, just those newer. On my last radio show, I just played the last 4 tracks of Archive. I played I think it was Peter Gabriel's "Signal to Noise." It was "Wake Up Call," your track "Nomads," which is beautiful. That flamenco guitar, amazing. And then Tony Banks' "Siren." And they're amazing tracks. I think it's some of the best stuff you guys ever wrote. It was all separate stuff that you guys did. And I was just thinking, it's like, imagine you guys in a room just trying to do stuff together again. And I don't know if it would work anymore, but it was just interesting, just trying to think of what would happen if it actually was attempted. But
well, I think with bands, you get a situation where it's much like driving a car. On the small roads in England, quite a lot of what you have to do is passive driving. You have to stop and wait for the other guy to come forward, because there isn't room for 2 cars to pass. And I think that the songwriting process in a group is very much like that, where it requires everyone, if you're going to share out this idea, it requires everyone to be both active and passive. And if you're too active, you might get your way in the short term, but then there's going to be resentments that are going to ensue in the long term. And all groups have this inbuilt obsolescence, unfortunately, even the greatest. And the shared pen is a tricky one. Never mind the shared fader. It's a tricky thing, and the shared song file these days costs rather different. And because technology affords so much these days, so much autonomy goes with the technology that you no longer have to go, this is how it goes, guys, and do a halfway decent performance yourself. Time's moved on so much, and you have to watch yourself rather than saying, yes, and here's my orchestral version of my forthcoming opus, and you guys all do A, B, C. It's like, it's not going to work. To take everyone back to school, it doesn't really function like that. So in the main, what's a lot easier is if I either work on my own material, and then everyone knows that I'm the one who has to be pleased, or I work with other people on their material, and it's they who have to be. It's them. It's you've got to do what's right for the music and the vision of the writer. So it's easier when there are clear distinctions. There aren't too many completely democratic bands out there. It doesn't really work that way. There's normally some very gifted control freak who insists on completely unreasonably having his own way, and there you see straight away most bands, or there'll be an alliance of two perhaps who'll dictate to the rest. That level of immovability, unless you've actually worked in a band, most of the time you won't have a clue what I'm talking about. But I suspect you do, because you worked in a band, and that's how it is.
And it's funny because I think Genesis is the one band that came the closest to being like that, because there was really no one member that really, like with the Beatles, you can tell, like McCartney, Lennon definitely were the dominant writers, and like you have, you definitely have, like every band, you can always kind of point out the dominant members. I think with Genesis, it was probably Tony Banks kind of dominated more of the writing, but he really didn't dominate that much. It seemed like everyone sort of had like kind of their hands on the controls a little bit.
Well, I think we all felt passionately about it, and Tony was probably the least flexible, and Mike tended to sort of reinforce Tony's power base. I think Mike realized where his bread was buttered by doing that, which meant that, unfortunately, many great ideas by other people would get sidelined in favor of the status quo. And I do remember, several ideas that Pete had that were very, 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 very good, which weren't used, and I think it was difficult for me. I was joining something that was a fully fledged working team. It already had its history, and by the time Phil and I joined, we tended to be more passive.
Right.
Now, that changed over.
You were the new guys.
We were the new guys. That changed over time, and so by the time I'd done my solo record with Voyage of the Acolyte and had Mike and Phil on it, in 1975, my only mistake was that it became a gold record, and that was, whoops, what's going on here? New boy shouldn't be having hits on his own, so it made it very tricky for me within the band. I demonstrated that I could function outside the group to the satisfaction of not just myself but the public, and but I didn't want to leave the band. It was just kind of made very difficult for me to stay. I was faced with a terrible conundrum, which was either I forgot about doing solo stuff and just accepted the fact that I would be a sideman with no guarantee of getting anything performed by the band whatsoever, or I had to prove that my allegiance was to music itself and go out on a limb, start my solo thing separately, and prove some things to myself and to the business. And of course, you're always proving to the business, every single album you do, your viability, no matter how much part of the establishment you seem to be. Of course, the competition every year does get tougher from younger guys who are being born every second, but it's great for me at this point in time. There's an audience that are hungry for it, for all things.
Wait.
And it's a wonderful time.
You're carrying a torch.
I'm carrying a torch for that, but also I think for musical, not just musical experimentation, but integration of all the various styles that exist at the moment.
Yeah.
That involves aspects of world music and aspects of jazz, blues, pop, rock, pantomime, comedy, you name it, all of those things. So even a hint of Kurt Weill on my new one. There are so many different ways of presenting a melody.
I think your stuff is the most versatile. Yours and Peter Gabriel's at least, but I think you have the most broadest, because you have so much music out there, so many albums out there. You have the most versatile amount of styles.
Yeah.
When I listen to I'm still discovering more things in your music. And Anthony Phillips is another member. I'm still starting to discover his albums too. But when I listen to your albums, like, it's amazing how many different styles that I'm listening to on your albums, that I have, all the different styles that I'm discovering on them.
Yeah, it's a funny
amazing.
thing. I think that, working with Roger King as well, who's a great all-rounder, it's a bit like, for me, the Beatles had George Martin as Beatles numbers 5 and 6.
Yeah.
Plus, I think that with Roger, who's a very trained, schooled musician, who's got all the logic there, literally, we seem to work very well as a team. Plus, I also work with my wife, Jo, who also can be, equally critical in a very positive way, who's always saying to me, musicians are very content to repeat themselves, whereas what you need is a variation, and not just in genre variation, but also a variation within a melody, so that it doesn't repeat itself entirely each time, but it's with either a complete difference or a slight difference. So there's a style that I've been working towards recently that involves, for lack of a better word, I'd say Slavic orchestration.
Oh, that's amazing. That's on the new album?
Yeah. Stuff that involves one of the characters from Azerbaijan and people from Hungary, as well as people from England. So we're trying to broaden the geography and the timeline of influences, so that those roots stretch right back across time and across Asia as we know it, from the Mongolian wastes to the Hebrides. It's all this kind of stuff. Yeah, I was thinking of Azerbaijan for a start, where Malik Mansurov comes from, the guy who's playing the tar on the album, and he tells me that 50% of the people in Azerbaijan are still nomadic. He plays a style of music called mugam, which is common to Turkey and Azerbaijan and other areas of the Middle East, and that's really amazing. It's like working with Ravi Shankar. It's like discovering a cross between Ravi Shankar and John McLaughlin. So in many ways, even though he does a short solo on the album, I often think of him as doing the star thing on this album, with myself as a kind of impresario in a way, bringing all these other characters forward to life. And in many ways, the pen is the most important thing for me, is writing this stuff and creating space for other people to flourish in. Now, my only problem, James, at the moment is I have to go to a playback in town. I have to go and premiere this thing to some people. So I'd love to talk longer.
Yeah. So can you, before we go then,
sure.
can you tell me a little bit more about this new album? Is it
it's a rock album, but it has influences that are far more wide-ranging than rock. It has everything from singing animals on it to orchestras, to folk music, right back to the campfire, sitting around a campfire doing it. In many ways, it's got a sort of back to the land feel about it as well. It's got its primitive and elemental moments in it, I think, that were common to certain people and certain bands that used Celtic and Middle Eastern influences.
I can't wait to hear it. And that this will be out next year?
Yeah, it'll be out at the end of March.
Oh wow. Okay, yeah. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to that.
All right. It's an interesting one. I think it's the strongest I've done so far, and I'm so in love with it. I'm not doing my usual thing, which is being very modest about it. I'm being immodest about it and saying.
You should never be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially when you're proud of it.
Yep.
How much more time do you have? Because I'd love to keep talking.
I'd love to, but I literally have to get out the door now, off to a playback. So I can't do any longer, I'm afraid. But maybe we'll get the chance to talk in the future.
Oh well, that'd be great. I really had loved having this chat with you.
Thank you.
It was a real pleasure and a real honor.
And
I've been a big fan for a long time.
Good luck with your band as well.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you.
What's the name of your band?
Oh, it's well, I have a few, but the one I was talking about was Diamond Jig, where we have
Diamond Jig.
We have five members. We're all writers. I'm the big prog head.
Right.
I'm the big
okay.
progressive rock.
Please say hi to the guys and wish them the best from me. Okay.
All right, I appreciate it. They get a real kick out of it.
Yeah, thank you. All the best.
Genesis fan. Thanks.
Marvelous.
Okay.
All right, James.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Lovely talking to you.
Thanks. Have a good morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. Well, that was definitely a real pleasure for me. I've been a big fan of his for a long time. I'm still beside myself because he's been a hero of mine for a really long time. Well, there's a couple things I want to point out. One is I did make a mistake. He mentioned Steven Wilson he was performing with, and I misinterpreted it as Ray Wilson. Steven Wilson, of course, is the singer, songwriter, guitarist for Porcupine Tree, who's been doing all those wonderful remixes that I've been playing of all the classic progressive rock albums like King Crimson and Jethro Tull, Yes. I should have known that because I'm a big fan of Steven Wilson and Porcupine Tree. But I got it confused with Ray Wilson, who was the singer for Genesis for the Calling All Stations album, and he was also a member of Stiltskin, and he has a solo career as well, and I think he was in a few other bands as well. He's a really good singer, and he did a killer version of the Carpet Crawlers for Steve Hackett's band when they were performing it live. So that was a mistake I made. I apologize for that, for kicking myself for that. That's something I would have caught myself on if I was listening to someone else do an interview. I should have brought that up. But again, I was kind of, I was stuttering quite a bit. I always stutter anyway, but I was stuttering more than normal, saying and ah, because of this was Steve Hackett. He's a hero of mine. And I would have asked a million more questions. I had a million more questions for him, but unfortunately we didn't really have that much time. But maybe I'll get a chance to interview him again when the new album comes out. I would love to. And maybe I'll get better at interviewing by that point. I'm going to definitely catch him this weekend. So hopefully you will catch him as well. Definitely pick up your tickets. And if you enjoyed this interview, definitely make a pledge to WUSB Stony Brook. You can give us a call at 632-6901 to make your pledge, or you can go to WUSB.FM to make your pledge. Again, this is WUSB Stony Brook. My name is James Murray. Hope you enjoyed this. Have a great day.